Now, if you have more than one criteria that must be true, then we can make use of the AND operator within our if evaluation section. So if we take the and/or working file and look at the simple sheet, this has a number of dancers and their score for 3 exams that they've sat this year. Now, if they happen to achieve greater than 55% in every single one of those exams, then they pass the year. So let's have a look at how we could achieve that with an if. Now, we could do nested ifs, say if the first exam is greater than 55%, then let's check if the second exam is greater than 55%, and then let's check if the third exam is greater than 55%. Or we can check all 3 in one go by using an AND. So we start with our if, open brackets. Then our AND operator works a bit strangely because it works like a function really, is AND open brackets, and then we put our logical conditions in. So B2 must be greater than or equal to 55%. So in a function that needs to be 0.55, comma, but our result for exam 2 must also be greater than or equal to 0.55, comma, and our exam result for exam 3 must be greater than or equal to 0.55. And then because that's the final condition, we close our bracket for the AND operator. So effectively we're saying and that one, that one, and that one must all be true. If they are, then the person happens to have passed their year. If not, so even if one of them doesn't meet the 55% requirement, then they get a fail. Close brackets. And that actually is a shorter and easier function to write than 3 nested ifs. Return, and poor Jill again has failed. Everything stays relative here, the C2, the D2 and the B2, so we can replicate that formula. And we have Sally managing to pass, John's a fail, Jane's a pass, fail for Mike, even though he had 2 very high scores, he's failed 1 exam, therefore he's failed the year, pass for Gemma, and then a fail again for Zoe. So that's using the AND operator inside the if statement. Now that AND operator can be used in a more complicated format with our graded sheet, where we're actually looking to give a grade. So not just whether they've passed or failed, but whether they've achieved merit or distinction. And in order to get the merit or distinction badge, they must meet the requirements for every single exam. So although Sally here has got a distinction in exam 1 and then 2 passes, she would not get a distinction for the year because she hasn't effectively got 3 distinctions. So we start with the first person equals if, open brackets, and we need to check and that all of the exams effectively have been passed. So greater than or equal to the pass percentage, comma, second exam is greater than or equal to the pass percentage, and then the third exam is greater than or equal to the pass percentage. Close bracket for the and. That ends that logical test. If the logical test happens to be true, so they have passed all 3 exams, what we then need to do is check whether they've actually got the merit for all 3 exams. So if, open brackets, and open brackets, exam 1 is greater than or equal to H2, comma, next exam is greater than or equal to H2, comma, and the third exam greater than or equal to H2, close brackets on the and, comma, to end the logical test. So if they've got a merit on all 3 exams, then we need to check with another if statement and another and whether they've managed to achieve distinction on all 3 exams. So is exam 1 greater than or equal to H3, exam 2 greater than or equal to H3, and exam 3 greater than or equal to H3. If so, then we've gone through 3 nested ifs here and 3 and statements, they've actually achieved distinction. If not, then they must have achieved merit, G2, and that closes that if statement. Then we need to be the false for the previous if statement, which will give them a pass, which is G1. And then we need to be the false for the outer if statement, which is a fail, which we don't have a label for, but we can type in. and then close the round brackets for the outer if. So that actually gets to be quite a complicated statement, and it happens to show that Jill has failed. What we also need to do is make absolute all of the references to the merit, pass, and distinction cells and values, which have been used quite extensively in each of our 3 ands, and then in the label outputs. And return. All the absolute making does is allow us to copy that formula. And we see Sally has passed, then there's a fail, then there's a pass, then a fail, then a pass, then a fail. Now, if Gemma here happened to get a distinction in her last exam as well, would she get a distinction for the year? Yes, she would. So the logic in there is working. Notice that that is actually quite a long formula, and I've had to extend the line by clicking the little arrow at the end here. So we can collapse it and then extend it should we need to read some more. That is quite a useful option for very long statements, and some of these nested ifs can get very long. So that's the AND statement used within the if. Works like a function really, because you put the name first and open brackets, and then each of the criteria that must be true are separated by commas.